Welcome back. Luigi Mangione pleading guilty today in federal court, admitting he fatally shot United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. The plea to 2 federal stalking counts with intent to kill now leaves Mangione facing up to life in prison. In court, Mangione saying he researched United Healthcare's investor conference, then traveled to New York City with the intent to kill Thompson. Prosecutors saying he tracked Thompson's movements before shooting him outside a Midtown hotel on December 4th, 2024.
At 6:45 on a December morning, Luigi Mangione stalked and murdered Brian Thompson in cold blood on a public sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan. Just a few moments ago, Mangione pled guilty to his heinous act. This was not a spontaneous act of violence. It was deliberate, calculated, and premeditated.
Mangione pleading without a deal. Prosecutors saying they can now seek the maximum penalty, life in prison, at his December 18th sentencing.
Today is a solemn and significant day. With today's guilty plea, Mr. Mangione has accepted full responsibility for the death of Brian Thompson, arising from the events of December 4th, 2024, outside of the United Healthcare Investor Conference here in Midtown Manhattan. It was a single tragic event, yet he's being prosecuted twice for the same conduct.
The defense filing a motion to dismiss the separate state murder case under New York's double jeopardy protections. That case remains set for trial September 8th. Joining us now, Joseph Tully, criminal defense attorney. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us. Always great to have you. Now, Mangione had pleaded not guilty to all charges up until today. Help us understand what's happening here. What could have made him suddenly change his mind?
Sure. So thank you, Tiffany, for having me on. It's always good to be here. I think what we saw here, the defense attorneys are making no secret of it. They're saying that in their press release, they said he pled guilty, he's accepting responsibility. Now he shouldn't be prosecuted twice for the same thing. We all know double jeopardy. However, there's a law in the books and there's a Supreme Court decision as recently as 2019, and it's on the issue of separate sovereigns, meaning the Supreme Court has already ruled that you can have a state prosecution and you can have a federal prosecution. And because you're dealing with 2 different governments, that's okay. It doesn't violate double jeopardy. However, as you pointed out at the top of the story, New York has a separate law preventing double jeopardy. So New York state protection has even greater protection, or New York state law has even greater protection against double jeopardy than the Constitution does. And so the defense attorneys had him plead in federal court to these 2 charges, and they had him admit all of these details, which they normally wouldn't do. However, I think they were trying to lay the groundwork for a later argument to appear in state court that, Judge, this case is now barred by double jeopardy. You have to dismiss the state cases.
And I want to play a clip of U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Jimmy McDonald, speaking after the plea. Let's take a listen to that.
While the defendant pled guilty, our office does not have a plea agreement with him. Instead, he pled open, which means he pled guilty to all pending counts in the indictment. There are no accommodations or concessions, and we are free to seek the maximum penalty under the law.
So what does Mangione's guilty plea mean for the federal prosecution?
Sure. So in the federal case, as we just heard from the prosecutor, this was done without a deal. You're always free to plead guilty in court. They can't really stop you from doing so. So here he pled guilty to the 2 charges, and he can face life in prison. That is the maximum punishment that he could face. Within the legal pleadings, it's reported that the defense is contemplating a 24 to 30-year sentence. However, there's no promises. The prosecution will try to seek the maximum life in prison, and there will be a big battle at sentencing over this. and we'll see how that plays out. But the judge voir dired him, meaning made sure that Mr. Mangione understood that he could be facing life in prison. The judge made that very clear to him, and Mangione understood that, or he affirmed that he understood that. So the defense is contemplating somewhat less than life sentence, but the judge is free to go to the maximum of life in prison.
So just on that last point, what move do you expect his defense counsel to make next?
So I think first they'll take what happened today and argue in state court for that dismissal, and then if they're able to get a dismissal in state court, their job as defense attorneys will be to come back to federal court and seek the lowest sentence possible for their client. And I imagine that they will try for their target, 24 to 30 years. Under the federal sentencing guidelines, they'll make arguments that, this is his, first offense. He doesn't have a lengthy criminal history. They'll make arguments under the law showing mitigation, showing that he's otherwise a good person, things of that nature, in order to get any sentence other than life in prison.
Turning to Brian Thompson's family now, they were in court today witnessing all of this, especially when Mangione said, quote, "I shot Mr. Thompson and he died." He added, "I knew what I was doing was illegal." How do you think the family is processing today's outcome?
I'm sure it was very difficult for them. It was reported that his affect in court was very flat, that he just talked about a killing very matter-of-factly, which had to be very distressing to the family members. He also put in a jab at healthcare in general by saying that, look, when I called and I purported to be an investor representing an investment company wanting to invest $15 billion into United Healthcare, I got an instant response. Contrasting from what he said about trying to get healthcare, problems with healthcare, trying to get treatment, trying to get medical assistance, he didn't find that. So he even threw in some personal jabs, which I think would be hard for the family to have heard.
And zooming out a bit here, this case has drawn significant public attention since day one. Now, Mangione's experience with the health insurance system following his back injury was highlighted in his statement. Now, in response, the U.S. attorney said, quote, "No grievance, political belief, or ideological cause can ever justify murder." What's your reaction to that?
I think that's accurate. It's not a defense to murder to say I was really mad at someone, or I disagree with their political beliefs, or I thought that they were too greedy. There are many actions that you can take within the law to target grievances that you have with the system, with corruption. Congress participates in insider trading all the time. So many people that go into politics come out with vast sums of riches, more than they had before they went in. That doesn't mean that you could go and shoot politicians. So, and also I would just point out that the greatest people who have affected the most amount of lives for the better all have forsworn against violence and have all renounced violence. And when you go for sort of elevating humanity and fighting for justice, fighting for good, that is how you make an impact with people, more so than using an act of violence. Violence is always a heinous act.
Well, Joseph Tully, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.